Florida is waking up this morning to the destruction caused by Hurricane Milton. At least four people have died. 3.2 million homes and businesses are without power. The hurricane also tore the roof off Tropicana Field. That's a stadium that had been prepared to shelter victims. Now, officials are warning people to stay home this morning because of downed power lines, possible storm surges, and all kinds of other dangers. And Florida meteorologist John Morales has been tracking the storm's progress all week. But it was his forecast on Monday that really struck a chord with many.
Just an incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
So that is John Morales, a meteorologist with NBC6 in South Florida. And for more on the state of things this morning, John has been good enough to join us. Good morning to you, John.
Oh, good morning to you, and thanks for the invitation.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us. That clip, needless to say, went viral. You apologized on air afterward. Tell us about your reaction. I mean, as a meteorologist, obviously that forecast meant something very, very significant to you.
Right. I mean, it is pretty geeky or nerdy stuff to be losing it over millibars.
Yeah.
But it meant something to me, and it means something to all meteorologists. 50 millibars of barometric pressure drop in the center of a hurricane over such a short span of time meant that the hurricane was developing explosively. It was going through hyper rapid intensification. And, when I saw, by the way, I looked at that just before going on air because I was going on the air at 12 noon Eastern time of the U.S. and the National Hurricane Center at that very moment issued an urgent bulletin indicating that it had become a Category 5.
Wow.
But with the pressure drop, I knew it was not just going to be a low-end Category 5. I knew that intensification would continue. And, there's a lot of things that have been building up. There's angst over the extreme weather events becoming more severe and more frequent. There's frustration over being a climate communicator for over 20 years, urging people and governments to take action, and not enough, of course, has been done. And then also, frankly, just empathy. I think somewhere I saw an article that's called anticipatory grieving.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all those things came together and led to that moment.
Well, I think you probably, though, were feeling what a lot of people feel when they see these situations now, these extreme weather events. We're watching them where you are right now. We've certainly experienced them ourselves in the Pacific Coast and the Pacific Northwest, as it's known in the United States. But can you emphasize to people, or can you make the link between these extreme weather events and climate change? Do people make that connection?
Well, I think more and more people make that connection. And in the U.S., for example, 3 out of every 4 people are accepting that climate change is occurring, and a majority of Americans, and I think this is going, might seem shocking to Canadians, but a majority of Americans are on board with the state of the science of climate change, indicating that they realize that this is human induced. As more of these events unfold, more eyes are being opened,
Right.
And I would hope. If anything good comes from that viral moment, 2 things, right? The short-term Milton emergency call to action so that more people might save life and property, but also in the long run, more eyeballs being opened about this crisis and how serious it is, and how it can, lead to a level of anxiety in a seasoned 40-year career meteorologist to get to that point, because it is really sad to see the state of affairs with the climate crisis, and especially when the solutions are there, right? The solutions are there. All we need is the willpower to implement them and be able to slow down the level of warming that we're seeing around the world.
Now, the Hurricane Milton finally made shore as a Category 3 storm. So tell us about the damage. Was it as bad as what had been predicted, or what state is the state in right now?
Well, I think, it's still very preliminary because some of the areas hardest hit by the storm surge, which I anticipate to be the costliest aspect of this hurricane, some of those areas are still inaccessible. So surveying the damage, seeing what's left of those coastal homes, anywhere from Sarasota, where, by the way, I've got a Canadian colleague from the Quebec province who was there live broadcasting during the hurricane, and he estimates, he was in Sarasota, that there was 10 feet of storm surge in
Yes.
that area. So you might imagine we're just going to start to get those images and see just how much damage there's been from salt water in those locations. As far as the wind damage, 100-mile-an-hour gusts, that's going to cause damage. You've shown the Tropicana field
Yes.
situation. The tornado outbreak was impressive. We had some of the strongest tornadoes ever registered in the state of Florida. It's led to deaths, as you know, and the flash flooding is something that we're still going to be evaluating after 18 inches of rain fell in a short span of time in some locations.
You're no stranger yourself to tropical storms, obviously. You grew up in Puerto Rico. You've been a meteorologist, as you just said, for more than 40 years. Um, Put this in perspective. I mean, Florida has seen a lot of hurricanes and a lot of damage and destruction. Put this one into perspective for us, if you can.
I think because of all the things in harm's way in that section of the west coast of Florida, this will end up rivaling Hurricane Ian from 2 years ago, which holds the record for the costliest disaster in the history of the state of Florida. They had over $100 billion of damage in the state in Florida alone. I think it might come close to that. Hopefully not.
Hmm.
I've seen it characterized as not the worst case scenario, uh, but yeah, I mean, of course, it wasn't the worst case scenario. It didn't get here as a Category 5, 180-mile-an-hour
Right.
buzzsaw, right? But that was well forecast. The National Hurricane Center was spot on with their forecast, and they did indicate that it would get here as a Category 3, and it did. But there's a long history of former Cat 5 hurricanes that reached the coast as a Category 3 and caused very extensive damage, and I think that'll be the case with this one.
Hmm. Just back to the video clip for a moment. I know that you thought carefully about whether you were going to share that with people, and when you did, it wasn't all a positive reaction. People were calling you a climate militant, and saying that you had an agenda, that you were exaggerating, that sort of thing. How do you handle the misinformation that you get around climate and weather events?
Well, first and foremost, I already shared some of the statistics in the US regarding views on climate. You should know that the climate dismissives in the US is about 10% of those surveyed. And
Hmm.
there are extensive surveys from Yale University and Yale Climate Communications about this subject. But the dismissives are extremely loud, right? They like to be heard. They like to, show the tribe that they are, loud and fighting the good fight and whatnot.
Oh, we
Uh,
have them here as well.
yeah. In the past, I used to engage. I no longer engage these folks. Um, most of the social media platforms that I'm on don't have that problem, but X, of course, has become the wild, wild west, right? So, you just have to ignore them. Um, you know, the reality is that what scientists told us decades ago is unfolding before our
Yeah.
eyes. The climate crisis is not, the polar bears in the year 2100. The climate crisis is here and now, and we're all starting to suffer from it, and it's only going to get worse. So we need to still try to mitigate the injection of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It can be done. We just need to get to it quickly.
Hmm. John, so good to hear you this morning. Thank you for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you take care. Bye bye. It's John Morales, meteorologist at NBC 6, South Florida.